Welcome to the 7th technique video in this series on adding beads to crochet. The technique in this video is an invention, meaning I haven't seen it in the literature. It is a rather unorthodox technique where you pull a loop down through the bead, work most of the stitch, and then pull the loop back up through the bead. I'll demonstrate the technique first, and then I'll discuss the pros and cons of doing it this way. Let's get started. Normally, I would grab the hook that matches my yarn, but in this case, this hook and my beads are not compatible. So I am going to use a hook that is compatible with my beads. I will have to be mindful of my tension because this is not the hook I would normally use with this yarn. And although I've worked my turning chains as if I'm doing double crochet, I'm going to start off this demonstration with single crochet. So this loop is the final loop of the previous stitch. Insert my hook, and for this technique I add the bead. The hook goes up through the bottom of the bead. Now I pull a loop down through the bead and the fabric. I'm down to only 2 loops, the last loop of the old stitch and 1 loop left on the new stitch. So now I take that loop off the hook, plunge the hook top to bottom through the bead, get the loop back on the hook, adjust my tension, and then pull that loop up through the bead, and then draw through to finish off my stitch. So that's what it looks like in single crochet. Here's what it looks like in double crochet. Double crochet normally starts with a yarn over, but not for this technique. For this technique, it starts the same way it just did for the single crochet. Into the fabric, up through the bottom of a bead, and then pull a loop top to bottom through the bead and through the fabric. Now, what I do is I make my yarn over after the fact. I'm going to enlarge that loop that plunged down, take the loop off the hook, and using the right side of my plunging loop, I make my yarn over, and then I put my hook back in my loop and adjust. I'm going to use the loose side of the plunging loop, and I'm going to work my stitch. So I pull through 2, which is what I would normally do on a double crochet. Now I am down to my last 2 loops. Evaporate the excess, take this loop off the hook, plunge the hook top to bottom through the bead, put the loop back on the hook, and then pull that loop through the bead or pull the bead down over the loop. They are equivalent maneuvers. Adjust my tension and finish off the stitch. So that's what it looks like in double crochet. For some silly fun, let's see what happens with 2 beads in double crochet. It starts the same way. Hook in the fabric and up through the bottom of 2 beads, and then drag that plunging loop down through the beads and the fabric. And then once again, I need to create my yarn over after the fact. I hang on to my loop, get my yarn over, put my loop back, and then work my stitch. So pull through 2, I'm down to 2 loops, evaporate the excess, and then I will pinch this loop, take my hook out, plunge the hook down through the beads, get the loop, and pull it up through the beads, or pull the beads over the loop. And if I've done it correctly, those beads drop down onto the body of the double crochet, and then I finish off the stitch. Let me show you what this would look like with a treble crochet. Again, it starts with into the fabric. I'm only going to use 1 bead for this. So it all starts the same way. So no matter how tall your stitch is, it starts the usual way, and then after the fact, you back up and add as many yarn overs as you need. So there's my 2 yarn overs because I want to do a treble crochet. Then I'm going to have to draw through twice. Now I'm at the end of my stitch. And finish off. Okay, so let's see what we got. The pros and cons of this technique are similar to the pros and cons of working with loose beads. If you want to do different colors of beads, it's much easier. You don't have to plan and pre-string. You can change your mind about what you're doing. You can improvise. If you don't like what you did, you can rip back. The beads will fall off because they're loose. If you do that, do put a towel or a mat or a shallow bowl underneath your project to catch the loose beads. So much more creative freedom with this technique. Also, you're not pulling yarn through hundreds of beads, so less likely to tear up your yarn. On the flip side, you are working with loose beads. So, you have a container of loose beads, maybe not as portable, because loose beads in a container can be trouble. This technique gives me a vertical orientation rather than horizontal for my bead. And remember, orientation may not matter on a plain bead like this, but if you had, say, this heart-shaped bead, you probably wouldn't want it sideways or upside down. So depending on your bead, orientation might matter. And I have lots of yarn through the bead because the post of the stitch is completely enclosed by the bead. In fact, I might have to shop around for beads with a larger hole in the center in order to accommodate this much yarn. And not only did I get a nice vertical orientation on my double crochet, I got the same thing on the single crochet. And when I stack beads up one on top of another, look at that, they line up. When I turn the work from the obverse to the reverse, it is reversible. And I don't have any little pieces of yarn going around the sides or anything. I don't have anything like that that might catch. So that's nice. And because the beads are down on the posts, they don't interfere with the chain across the top. I don't have to think about where the hook goes on the next row. The major downside of this technique, as you saw, is it is slow. If there is a more efficient way to do this, I haven't figured it out yet. Maybe somebody else will, or maybe someone can come up with a little gadget that helps pull the yarn down and then pull it back up. I'm not sure. So the biggest downside of this technique is it is not fast. But if you didn't want to use it over the whole fabric, if you wanted to use it just for beads and an edging, I think it would be fantastic. So there you are. That's what happens when you use the rather unorthodox technique of pulling loops down and then back up through beads. Thank you for watching this series on adding beads to crochet. Happy crochet!